Excited to have Ryan Bell with us today for another Beyond the Canvas Conversations with Gamma live stream. Ryan's got a fascinating story. He kind of blew up recently through a huge discovery. He was a Gamma partner artist before that, and obviously getting to know him, found out he was into super early computer art and generative art, lived through the kind of like 2021 mania, but enough from me, Ryan. I'd love for you to introduce yourself. So for anyone who doesn't know who you are, a little bit your backstory, where you came from, how you got into this whole space, maybe how you got into Bitcoin, certainly the Namecoin story. But yeah, let's chat. And, first and foremost, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. So, where did it all begin? Just thinking back to how we met was through Gamma, like a artist partnership,
Yep.
where I was looking at how to get art onto Bitcoin because you were just starting to see ordinals kind of pop off, and it was kind of confusing at first because how they can have these lineages, which are kind of unique to Bitcoin. I wasn't exactly sure how it worked or how you got art on there. So I was looking at just doing it on my own, but then I saw there was this kind of partner program and I reached out and they're like, yeah, you're in. Here's access to upload. So then it was just a moment of trying to figure out, like, well, shit, now what do I upload? And I had kind of this fractal that I had been playing with forever, but had never really found a good home for. And then figured out kind of how to get that in the right spec, and then upload it onto the platform. And then that became like a parent token. And then you started to have these additions downstream from there. And then we started selling those. And then that was kind of quiet at first, because it was kind of during this bear market where there's not a whole lot of sales, not a whole lot of activity, and it's just kind of this 50 edition set at $50. I think I was thinking like at the time it was like 51, 51, like area 51.
Oh
So I
yeah.
was trying to like make this kind of connection there because the price I think was right when it was hitting around 100K. So the
Mhm.
price for 50 editions, then the way the sats were, it was like 51 US dollars. So it was like the trifecta I was trying to hit. And then we sold a few, and there's still a few left to mint, but it's pretty much minted up, which is pretty cool. So then during that whole process, I got an email from this guy. And as you're releasing drops, you're so used to like getting these emails that just are obvious scams. Like I probably get Coinbase hitting me up on my phone like every other day now. Like
They are
if
not
this is
real
your
though.
number,
Yeah.
hit Y or call our 800 line to give us your account information to help you. But I get those, nonstop. So getting this email from this guy, I'm kind of just thinking like, damn, this guy knows a lot of personal information because he's like, did you do this? Did you do this? How about this on this day? And I'm like, I don't know where this is leading, but he's done his research more than most of these other, scams. But then I start talking to the guy and he's like, hey, so I've co-funded this Namecoin project that was building an explorer, and then this explorer was able to dig up these kind of artifacts that no one's really looked at because the chain has kind of died.
Mm.
And the way the history works is if you mint, the way I minted like a base 64 image. If you don't continue to renew it and renew it and renew it like you do like an ENS, then someone else ends up with a name because they're also just names, since like Namecoin, and
Yep.
then they'll change the metadata and do whatever they want with it. So all you could see was that I had registered this name and that someone else owns it, and then someone else owns it, and then kind of the metadata is changing as it moves forward. Yet, if you had the block explorer, you could go back to that first inscription and then see like, oh no, this name has an artwork, kind of like inscribed into the Namecoin ID. But until you had those explorers, it just wasn't really being viewed. Like there's nowhere to see it, there's nowhere to look at the history. No one had a full node really that was doing this kind of look on random transactions 10 years ago. But this dude built it, and then he had the right queries, and then they started finding, like when was the first, link to an image minted, which was like even earlier than the one I did. And then what came after, these puny codes and things like that. So it was pretty cool. He was able to kind of dig all this up and then find me. And then we just started going back and forth on email for like 100 threads. And he's like, okay, I'm going to publish this. So then he finally kind of got it all out there. And it was kind of the story of how this token, which was just from like an old, like, I don't know if you remember like the I'm sure you've seen it, the Rage comic maker, like the, and fuck yeah, and
Yeah.
all those characters. So yeah, we used to just screw around on Reddit with those, and then just with the comic maker, make goofy memes and post them. And then somewhere in that history, I had like downloaded one, and then just tried to see like, hey, if I add it here, can I get it to show up on this early Explorer? Just fucking around. And then it ended up becoming probably one of, if not the earliest, at least base 64 or images posted as a fungible token,
Yeah, which is a
which is
wild.
crazy.
It's a wild story, isn't it? And I let's go further back before we then kind of
Yeah.
work our way up to that point. So you and I have chatted. Probably a similar vintage in terms of where when we grew up. So playing around using Flash, using all those early, MS Paint, probably like really
Yep.
mucking around, creating memes, and like you said, like using Reddit. Reddit, crypto Reddit is obviously like later than when Reddit started, but a lot of the culture, a lot of stuff a lot of the memes and whatnot started there, and they're obviously, based on earlier internet than that. But yeah, tell us about
Yeah.
kind of like early Ryan Bell and, your fascination with computer art and memes and internet culture and how, I guess, then getting the fuck yeah guy onto Namecoin, and then
Right.
we'll chat more about that. But I'd love to go further back before we go forward.
Further back. Further
Yeah, yeah.
back. I remember, like, this is gonna date me, but being a beta tester on AOL and then
Nice.
having friends that were making like punters and things like that, where you could just punt people off AIM and just screwing around with it was kind of early 90s like hacker culture into like Hotline and IRC.
Yeah.
So like it goes kind of back into that almost like pre-social, which was kind of before pre-memes because it was just like email and IRC and things like that. But that's where I really kind of was a young, I don't know, maybe like 12 years old, 90s, digging in, to these kind of like random chat arenas is what it was back then. And then file sharing. And then right around this time is when P2P starts to go online.
Hmm.
So then writing P2P and then eventually start screwing around with JavaScript and then making these little Flash games. And that's when all ActionScript 3 hits and then Shockwave. So I was always into like Shockwave and just trying to figure out how to do these little interactive games online. And then from there, Flash just kind of dies, but then we get HTML5 in its place. But that's probably where I got my earliest kind of digital art fix.
Yeah, totally. And wow, IRC. So that's those channels. There's some dodgy places to go if you looked hard enough.
Yeah, it was a mess. Like, yeah, as much of a mess as it is now, it was a mess then.
What do you think drew you to it?
You know, I don't know. I mean, there's a certain like buzz around it, like there is crypto now. Like there wasn't crypto then, so that would have been like whatever that kind of edgy digital thing was, is what that was then. It was like you were just starting to get, again, it was kind of like a privilege where you'd be able to get into these rooms, but only if you have access can you get in, and then only if you know someone can you get moderator, and then only if you're mod can you do, XYZ. So it was still kind of an elite, thing as much as Web3 has kind of recreated that again with, access lists and white lists and, you know, getting in first.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it? So it's not new. Like everything's always been done in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah, it keeps coming back around a little bit different for like a next generation. I'm just still there playing with it.
For sure. And the Namecoin thing. Namecoin, correct me if I'm wrong, was a fork off Bitcoin.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it came to be totally honest, like how it first came out. Because I remember there weren't that many at the time. There was really just Bitcoin and then Namecoin and then like maybe Litecoin, but there weren't that many really. But it was, I mean, a pretty significant change too to be able to do these name registrations. So definitely like based on it, but with a lot of mods.
And how did you get into it? How did you come across it? And then, tell us about the fuck yeah guy
Yeah,
story, and what even possessed you to get it on chain with your name? Because
right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was back then, like you didn't know to like use different wallets for things. So it's one of these things where eventually this guy's like, "Hey, you also registered, your own website on the same one you did for this and this and this." It's like, yeah, good research. But yeah, back then it was really just there was Mount Gox was really the only place you could go to get coin.
Hmm.
And of course, it gets hacked. So I'm in before the hack, and then I don't remember how I lost whatever banking slips you would have needed to prove ownership after the hack. But whatever I had in there was just totally wiped. And then there was another one called Bitcoinica that I was playing with, and it was as degen as it gets.
Hmm.
And same exact thing, they get hacked in quotes, and then all the funds are gone. So then this was sometime either right before then or right after then. I'd have to look it up, but it was right around that time. I'm just screwing around with Namecoin, just almost like as a test net because there's not that real like any examples for what you could really do with it. So just trying to push the boundaries of, can you upload a file into a name? And then the smallest thing you could possibly fit was maybe a thumbnail. So then it's, well, what thumbnail do I upload? And it's like, well, I got this. So I just kicked that up. And then, hey, it worked. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and like, so it wasn't like you were like a huge fan of it. It was just something that worked, and you were
Yeah,
playing
I
around
had
with it.
it. Yeah, I probably had it on my desktop just from making random memes, So it was kind of like you just open in Photoshop. What's on my desktop? What can I use? You're scrolling and you're like, fuck yeah, this one.
Yeah, which it makes sense,
Of
and
course, it's the
it's
obvious choice.
it's even fun to say, and you know, it was this person or archivist, and yeah, I was reading the article. Cal, who was it looked like
Yeah,
lead dev from Namecoin in 2011. This is 2012, so this is
it's
for a lot
early.
of people around, it's early. It's not like super early internet necessarily, but it's pretty early internet really. And
It is.
they kind of came across you because there was this. Well, I'm not sure what the D stands for. I know, like in Reddit, it's like r slash, but Bell Creative Studio, RTB, Shing, all of these kind of like who was this? Like, how did they realize it was you?
Yeah, it was from the Bell Creative Studio one. Because on that, I had some of my early gen art on the same page. And then I had posts I was doing like, here's how you could put, a song inside an image. And then here's how you could put an image onto like Namecoin. And it was just kind of all those little breadcrumbs where eventually this dude pieced this whole thing together and then emailed me, you know, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And it was like, yeah,
Had
crazy.
you had you remembered it? Had you thought about it? Or was it sort of like a
No,
forgotten memory even for yourself?
totally. It was one of those things where, because like it wasn't a big thing at the time,
Mm,
because there were already, like someone had posted an image into the Bitcoin transaction block,
yeah,
and then there were links to images, and then there was, this is kind of before Ethereum, but then
yeah, it is.
everyone who's thinking about the first NFTs is kind of thinking of Ethereum. So in my head, like it's already just kind of lost into kind of the history of it. And then it's kind of a weird spec where it's more of like a renewal process than like a true non-fungible token. So then it's like, is it an NFT? So it's not quite NFT. It's kind of a meme coin, but then it's not really like a fungible meme coin like we know them because usually you don't have a meme coin. It's like a 721. So it's just kind of a weird history of like, well, what is it? So yeah, I'm not totally sure.
That's what
I
I
think
was
it's
gonna
too
say.
early. It's like too early to be first, which is stupid.
Well, that it's an amazing piece of like history, I guess. It's funny that there are these on-chain or kind of like digital archaeologists. Did it strike you that
Yeah.
you sort of become part of internet history, whether or not it's of like
It
financial
was
value or not?
so random, yeah, because I had done like, let's just say like 10 projects on, let's say FX Hash. I did a couple on art blocks, and I was trying to like build up this like, book of work that I was doing across all these different change, all these different projects with kind of unifying features. But anyway, I was hoping to get that in. There was this big book that came out, on NFTs from Tashin. And it was kind of like, okay, here's the who's who of everyone who's made it. It's like, shit, I didn't make it in. I like out of all these projects, none of them hit the mark. But then if you look in the book, at like the very first one, they have the fuck yeah as like unknown artist. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm in the book. So then, they're gonna get it at least like published under me for their next whatever update to the book.
Yeah, which is
But
it's pretty cool. And like you said, it's a renewal thing. So do you own it? Like how I'm like a little bit. I'm not really au
no,
fait with how it all works. Like so, what people renewed your how do yeah? Tell us how does that all work?
yeah, it's like if you had. let's say a valuable ENS,
Yeah.
and then you just did nothing.
Oh, then
So then
someone else
yeah, someone else registers it, and then now they have the value. It's like a domain name, basically.
got it. And so does
So
some who owns it? The
yeah,
Bitcoin?
so yeah, the guy, the archivist, of
Oh,
course. Yeah. So that's why he did the work, because he's like, I need to find the full history of these things I own and kind of build the story and all of that.
that's crazy. So
So
so where and how does he own it? Is it like the Namecoin is fairly defunct now? Like what is it in a
I have
wallet?
no idea. Like, I was under the assumption that it was all but gone,
Mm,
but then something about there's like pooled hashing. So because it's pooled with Bitcoin, it ends up being like just like a crazy amount of still like block hash rate.
yep.
So it's still running. So he owns it just under there, and it's got like as much proof of work as anything.
That's wild, and I guess he can still decode it, and that's how he found the image.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely like a vested interest in, getting all that at least visible, because with the chain kind of dying off a little bit, no one even can see it if no one does the work to keep it, out there.
That's so interesting. And did it, when you came to Bitcoin and to ordinals and the ability to inscribe on chain, did it kind of take you back to those days when you were putting things
Yeah,
on chain? It's not just like a pointer to, some kind of decentralized.
totally. Yeah, it's like a whole nother, take on NFTs. Like, each time one of these comes out, it's all the same, but just a little bit different. So it's cool on Bitcoin how they do follow, down to the smallest unit.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, then with that kind of recursive history, it's really pretty cool. But yeah, it's a throwback to those early days.
So much. And tell us about, that Bell Creative Studio and who Xing was and
Yeah.
how did you get into generative art and sort of continuing the journey from those early experiments?
Yeah, so I mean, ever since high school, like I got my first job even like as a junior in high school, just doing shockwave development at the time. But it was like shockwave and Macromedia Director and Flash. And then we started doing websites, and then I got a few iOS apps. But it was always just kind of like freelance contracting, just kind of scooting by as like a, artist for hire, but never like an artist where I could sell my art for anything valuable.
Mm.
So always making a living off of art, but then never really being able to sustain myself off of my own art up until probably peak of generative art mania 2021, where for the first time ever, it was like, okay, you could do this full time and sustain yourself for now. And then it was gone in a year, but for that one maybe peak year, it was incredible.
Tell
So
us
at
about,
Bell Creative Studio, yeah, from
yeah.
Bell Creative Studio, that was when I was mostly doing stuff for it'd be like local bands in Las Vegas. So doing like house band here, house band there. I did like jerky shops. I did like nail parlors. Um, did taco shops, like just all of these different restaurants and local bands in Vegas. So Bell Creative Studio was kind of that big open arch over, here's some random generative art on my blog, and then here's kind of the bread and butter stuff I'm doing around town, and hoping to get like bigger clients, but mostly just mom and pop shop kind of stuff. And then later, kind of rebranding a little more under that I, Ryan Bell, this is my art for sale, and then trying that. And then just the timing was perfect to where it was in the right package and it had, kind of the right whatever venue to get out there. And then just kind of rode that into all the different chains.
Yeah, and that was in 2021. So were you creating,
Yes.
was it like long form generative work? Were you in terms of like being,
Yeah.
yeah, on
I
chain
had
stuff?
seen some, like I had seen some, like you see ringers and like, okay, that's really cool because you can appreciate, kind of the complexity, but also kind of the polish on it. And then the stuff Tyler Hobbs was doing, and then you see these price tags, and you're like, okay, like this is serious digital art, but
Hmm.
also in kind of like a medium that I feel like I can approach. Like I don't know on the Venn diagram of like, can you, code, and then you're interested in crypto, and then you're here, at the time to be able to enter this market. So then I saw FX Hash coming online, and it was kind of like this entry where they're kind of pulling in a new cohort of new artists getting in, making their first publishes on this platform. And that's when I kind of got into their beta. And then on FX Hash beta, put out, as many projects as I could in kind of all these different kind of flavors, and then rode that into 1.0 and then 2.0. And then I've been kind of releasing in these other spots and then circling back around as kind of everything moves forward.
And what happened in that gap between, what were you up to between, say, 2012 when you were messing around with Namecoin, and
Yeah,
then like we said, 2021?
yeah,
That's a
time
long
gap.
time. Time's crazy, and obviously, Bitcoin was becoming bigger and bigger, and number was going
Yeah.
up. We had like the wild cycle in 2017.
I set a lot of that out.
Mm,
I got like I got floored on the Mount Gox hack and then the Bitcoinica one. And
mm,
then it took me a minute to put some cash into Coinbase because that was kind of when Coinbase was just coming out.
yeah.
And then I remember putting in like a good amount of savings, but then for whatever reason, I doubled my money and I pulled out. And I was so happy. I was like, all right, I doubled my money. I proved that I can invest well in crypto. And then, now I have to use the money for, rent and this and this and this. And then just pretty much wasn't trading crypto at all for a lot of that cycle, probably until like 2020 or so. And then, bought the top again. So just for a while, I was just back into doing music. I put out probably a few songs, and then I did, just more websites. And then I was playing around with some different social ideas I had for different like social apps. Did a couple sketches using like Ethereum testnet, but at that time, like most of what I was publishing would have just been on testnets. Just like, hey, here's an idea for a thing. Here's an idea for a thing. But I wasn't really like publishing out too much on mainnet.
It seems like you've got into a lot of things. It's a bit of a crypto cliche, but early.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely like an energy to being in early. Like there's a hype cycle where you want to be in early for it to be fun.
And how do you think you sort of achieve that? I don't even necessarily mean, getting into coins early. Like you said, we all wish we bought
Yeah.
Bitcoin and ETH back when they started, but just in terms of that experimentation and bringing your creative side into it, yeah, like it seems like I read in that article that the archivist put out that you really started getting creative and coding and playing around on the internet, or at least playing around on the computer from 8 years old, which is
Yeah.
early as well.
Yeah, yeah, as early as you can be. Yeah, I've always just been addicted to this thing. Just kind of playing with it in different ways that you can make, little experiments and little social toys with it.
And then to get this email from Archivist and then for it to kind of blow up, how was that week at least? It's funny how hype and,
It was exciting. It was
15,
cool.
15 minutes of fame it
Yeah,
happens.
that was totally it. Yeah, it was. First of all, it's like, how did this guy, come up with all this personal data? And then it's like, oh shit, this is going to be cool eventually. So then, start, getting the article material ready and kind of helping him figure out all the history. So yeah, that was a ton of fun. Such a
It's,
surprise because I had all but forgotten about it, really.
yeah, well, it's so funny. Has it reinvigorated you? Has it changed your
I
thinking
think
or what?
so. I think so. I mean, yeah, a little bit because it's one of those things where you just kind of totally push it out there and no one cares, and it's kind of, that's cool. And then later it comes back around. It's like, holy shit, that was like one of the first, NFT artworks on chain. Now that we know what an NFT is, and then now that I'm, still trying to do it, it's kind of cool to then look back on that.
For sure. And do we know who the original artist, or,
I wish. I have no idea.
yeah, were they
Yeah,
anon?
yeah, I think so. I think so. Like if they are out there, they're not like super well known for it. Like
Yeah,
because I looked it up, and you can't really find it. So
well,
it's another mystery.
that is a mystery. I'd love for that mystery to be
Yes,
uncovered. It's cool that you somewhat preserved it, I guess.
I guess. Yeah, yeah. It's super fun and such a fun time on Reddit too, when those were really just like everywhere.
Yeah, it's funny. Like with Reddit, I'm doxed, working at Gamma. You can see my name on the screen now, but my pseudonym to start with, which is Eli Herf, the ELI component of that was from like early crypto Reddit days with like Eli 5 explained like I'm 5. So
Nice.
a lot of people,
That's good.
a lot of people think my name's Eli and it's not, but yeah, it's so funny
Yeah.
how early Reddit things really did shape, I
Yeah.
guess, a lot of internet
Today I
culture. There was
learned.
some, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so many of those
Do any
subreddits.
do any of those subreddits like stick with you? Are there any like instances or occasions or comments or anything that you did or people you interacted with that
I
yeah,
mean,
I
even the Eli 5, I use that all the time with ChatGPT. You
yeah.
know, it's like a dumb subreddit, but it's such a good tool.
So true. And does ChatGPT clearly knows what you're talking about then?
Yeah, 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 totally. In the training.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue because I saw that you were also seems like a little bit of a cliche comment after before, but you were quite early to exploring AI and machine learning too.
Yeah, always. I mean, always playing with kind of the whatever that thing is. It's kind of like just being on Twitter. You'll see just something blow up, and you're like, all right, I'll check it out. So I remember TensorFlow dropping, and then into PyTorch, and then LLMs, so then just kind of going wild there. But yeah, I mean, how crazy is it, that you can now just talk to your computer? And it's the same computer, it's just like the software hit. But like you didn't really need this upgrade for it to be able to do it. But in just one day, it's just like, okay, now it talks.
It really
Now it
does, and
thinks.
it does, and it says things to me like yesterday. It made me uncomfortable because it said, I think this is a great idea, Brett, and I'm like, that okay.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, I don't know how to respond to that. I said, thanks. So yeah, but
Yeah.
what do you think drew you to AI when back when you first did, and then I saw you have released some artwork. I think it was on Rarible with some of your
Yeah.
AI work.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a new medium. It just sparks something, some curiosity of what can you do with this? What does this make easier? And then just with the images, it was really cool because it was right when we were just starting to get style GANs. So that was the first kind of thing that really drew me in was you could take an image and then give it another image, and then one's the style, one's the original, paint the style into the original as like a brand new Photoshop filter. So like back in the day, I had alien skin eye candy, I had morph for Mac, I had all these random goo. So I was like into this stuff, and then finally it was like this new medium you could play with. So then into there, you started getting those, the multimodals and things like that.
It's almost
And
kind
then
of
try to train them. I would
yeah,
try to train them, and you just get these melted looking objects, which is still like it was so cool to be able to start doing. It was just a new thing at the time.
yeah. It's funny to think people can have a look at that article which is on your X feed, but to think that that is what everyone sort of thought AI art looked like, and if anything, it's almost become it hasn't been around for that long, but it's
No,
become
not at
that's
all.
become like quite nostalgic almost. It's become so good. It's become so
Yes,
crisp, so realistic that
so fast.
the early mistakes are kind of I find them quite aesthetically pleasing because they're so
Yeah,
weird. Whereas now
yeah.
it's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, and I remember people saying that too when they first came out. They were like, some people were like, I hate these artifacts. I got to get these artifacts out. And they're like, no, you're not going to be able to reproduce these, in the future, or you will on purpose. But like, this is going to be, a sign of the times of how the style looked at that point. It's going to be cool. And then now looking back, they totally have that where you kind of look at them with nostalgia, that like melted plastic, deep dream goo.
So true. It's like that era type thing, kind of like glitch, a little bit
Yeah,
like early Flash stuff, which was you know
yeah.
glitchy and flashy and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, it totally has its own vibe. Early, it looks very early AI,
Yeah, which
and then
is
now, yeah, now it's just like insane though. Crazy how fast this happens.
yeah, no, it's certainly no knock on it. It's sort of amazing what you can do now, but it does. It's funny because it's happened so quickly. That wasn't that long ago, and I read,
No,
and you can tell from your piece on Bitcoin Dark Forest, which we'll chat about as well, and I ask about the name too,
yeah,
but uh, that you're into like minimalism. Was that something that was in your design work, or did it vary, or is it just something that you're passionate about, kind of on the side of whatever
yeah.
you have to create?
No, I'm definitely like far to the minimalist side of things. Like I don't have, a ton of things, even then, like I keep my computer like super minimal. I don't really keep, a ton of old backups and things. So even in my art, I've always kind of been drawn to these kind of minimal, let's say minimal algorithms, but with kind of a maximalist, what can you juice out of it? Because I do love these like crazy detailed, stupid, over the top fractals. But it's cool when you can get that from, let's say, one line of code. So it's that kind of like minimal, maximal output thing I really like.
And how did you get into coding? How did you start learning, or was it something that evolved? Obviously coding websites, building games, doing
Yeah.
what, and then building out generative art projects.
Definitely like self-taught. I went to a magnet school for, computer and CAD and things like that. So I studied like 3D for a while, but for the most part just screwing around, putting in a lot of hours coding and then just getting in at different projects. So I did some open source stuff and then you get some PRs through. You get a lot that get a lot of feedback, but then just playing that and then Stack Overflow I did for a long time just like for kicks, answering, random questions and asking a bunch of questions. So this was before ChatGPT. You would have to use Stack Overflow for the kids now. And you would earn points just to like be a good Samaritan and answer questions all day.
Yeah, I don't know if it existed in the States. It probably did. Everything kind of came from there. But to think that back when I was a kid and we first got our first mobile phones and you could send a question to like this thing called like Bongo or something, it would cost you $5 and you get an answer back.
Sounds about right.
And
Yeah.
and you had to pay for ringtones and wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember ringtones. Nobody uses ringtones anymore. You
No,
buy them too. Yeah. That's the funny thing too. You would spend money to have it.
so crazy. I basically keep my mobile on silent and barely
Yeah,
even.
everyone does. Can't imagine paying to make it make sound.
Yeah, it's amazing. And yeah, so I'll pull it up. Tell us about Dark Forest, your first and so far only. Hopefully, we see some more work of
Yep.
yours, Bitcoin. Um, People should be able to see it now as we pull it up. Yeah,
Yeah.
the your your piece on Bitcoin, your first inscription, Dark Forest. Did the name come
Yes.
from? Is Dark Forest? I could be guessing just because I love this book. Is it from the Three Body Problem or is it something else?
Related for sure. I mean, that was a dope book and dope movie or dope
Yeah,
show, I should say.
very cool. The
But
books are better,
yeah,
but that's always the case. But yeah, yeah. Was it somewhat inspired from that, or is it just
yeah,
quite?
yeah. Inspired by that kind of theory of the kind of the hidden corners of the universe where you might not want to make a ton of noise for
In-
sure.
Interesting? Yeah.
And this
Tell.
was right. This was like peak of when like, do you remember like randomly like everyone was seeing drones just like out of nowhere, and it was like, why are there drones hovering over these whatever bases? So it was during that time, and I was just kind of playing off of it.
Yeah. Tell us
For
about the
whatever
process.
reason, yeah, for whatever reason, my Twitter feed was just nonstop UFOs for like 3 weeks, and I was like, okay, like there's a theme here. So then I was like, maybe I'll just call it Dark Forest because it had kind of these ominous vibes. But it was a piece I had had for a long time, but it didn't have a name until then.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell us more about that. You said you had it for a long time. When did you create it? Was it just sitting in
Yeah,
a folder?
basically, yeah. So I had played around with a ton of fractals, and I'm always kind of going back to them. But then this was one where I was also starting to learn, inspired kind of by Fidenza and those kind of flow fields. So then it was like, well, how do you do a flow field through a fractal? So this is kind of my first experiment of doing that where it looked cool. I had done a few others, but this was the one where I was like, okay, now that looks pretty sick. So that one I had just kind of saved as like the one good output.
Yeah. Wow. So there's a bit of history behind this one too. When do you think it was from?
Oh God. I mean, it has to be, it's before 2021, but probably like maybe 2020. It wouldn't be that much earlier, but somewhere around that time.
But it's funny in crypto because 5 years is a very long time now.
I know, right? Yeah, it's ancient.
Yeah, and
Saved for just the right place to put it.
well, it's cool because obviously because it's inscribed on Bitcoin, much like I guess the fuck yeah guy on Namecoin, how the code is still there and you can still view it for those who
Yeah,
want to keep it alive. I guess that's the thing with inscriptions is the data, for whatever the file is on chain. So as long as there's someone who wants to find it and pull it up and decode it and
yeah,
show it on some kind of explorer, it's always going to be there now.
that's cool. Especially on Bitcoin, it's going to survive.
Yeah, which is, well, does that change that? Like, does it come into your thinking when you're deciding on what you're putting on Bitcoin or the art that you are creating, different, and just in
Yeah,
comparison to other chains, like obviously you might have decide to put something on Tezos, early FXS,
right.
I assume was Tezos. They,
Yeah,
now they have Base, and perhaps other chains, but yeah, yeah. Does that come into play?
definitely. Definitely. Especially because on Bitcoin, you have this incentive to keep it kind of code golfed a little bit.
Mm.
And, but you also have that kind of built in, like really strong archival quality to it. So I think it really makes it super intentional, just knowing that you have, like, you really want to cut down on space and it's really going to last. So I see that kind of as like the peak of this kind of like pixel art kind of archival on-chain art thing, where maybe on the total other side you have like IPFS sort of stored things on Tezos, where
Mm.
it's like, okay, now we're kind of climbing another thing of like, I don't know how long this is going to last, and then on top of that, I don't know how long this is going to last. So all these things have to last for this to work, and storing things that way feels a little less permanent in some angles.
Yeah, for sure. It's always a spectrum, but I think each chain is a bit of a playground, which kind of fits in
Yeah,
almost like the theme of the way in which you've created
totally.
since you were 8 years old.
Yeah, just trying to see like what can you do different on this one. So I did one even, it was Hyperdrive was one I did on art blocks, but you couldn't use any images. Like they wanted it to where everything has to be code, no images. But then on FX hash you could do images, but it wasn't stored on chain. So it was kind of like, on one I'm going to add images and then I did on the other one just pure code. But just kind of like playing to whatever you could kind of do unique on what platform or on one platform, try to push that farther.
For sure. And you mentioned to me that you've got a release coming up on FX Hash, so it's going full circle, really. Hopefully, we see some more work on Bitcoin. We'll definitely chat about that. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
for sure. I want
what
to.
what's coming up on FX Hash? What chain is it? And what are you thinking? Tell us about it.
Yep. Yep. So it's kind of connected to even this Bitcoin one in that it's another fractal, but it's one again that I've been playing with for over, probably like again 5 years at least, playing with this one particular fractal that kind of looks pretty cool. And then figuring out a way to make that like really wide in terms of the different range of generative output you can do. So try to give it, a ton of palettes and then a ton of knobs. And then kind of the unique thing on this version of FX hash that they're adding is lineage, which is kind of like on Bitcoin, kind of the recursion you can do
Hmm.
in that you'll have a token and then under that you can have a tree of people who descend from that parent, but then you can mint one off of that and then that one becomes like a new parent, and then you kind of get these long lineages of, let's say, 20 mints down one strand and then 20 mints down another strand, and then as kind of this generative algorithm you can say, on any branch I want to inherit the palette, and then on another I want to inherit this knob, and then you start to get kind of these weird interactions between, you can mint this one and then re-roll it and then mint a evolution off of this one, and then once it gets to like a depth of 10 you can make this thing happen. So really just playing with all the different bells and whistles on their new platform. They just rolled it out like this week or last week, so it's going to be kind of one of these early ones there too, of just kind of playing with the new features and hoping to do it first.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's one thing that I do love on Bitcoin is that lineage, and whether it's additions related to an original or parent-child system, or just
Yeah,
artwork that calls upon another artwork, that must
it's
speak to you.
cool. Yeah, yeah, kind of like hyperlinked. It's very cool.
And how's it visualized with how FX Hash have done it? Because that's cool. That's something that, like you said, is quite unique to
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
it's cool. It's, I'm gonna still call it a work in progress.
Mm.
Like it's early, but from what I've seen, they do these kind of like almost like spherical projection or something, where you see like all these lines shooting out from like, here's this parent that has all these children, and then this one child has a child of a child, and then it shoots off to the side, and you can click on any of these, and then you can kind of highlight all their kind of unique features. It starts to look more like a living organism. So the first ones they're putting out kind of are inspired by that biology of these kind of like little microbacteria looking mints that are cool. that you can then evolve in different ways. So it's kind of like even like you have the Chromie squiggle, and then you take it to like the farthest end of like this whole crazy platform with tokens and all these different algorithms. But
Yeah,
I'm
and
excited to play with it.
yeah, of course. Well, it sounds right up your alley, and I did laugh. You said all the bells and whistles. It feels very
Yes,
pertinent
yes.
to, pardon the pun, pertinent to your surname. And and, and it's funny, it takes me back to something which I meant to ask you a little bit earlier, that, no time like the present, that you tried to, like, it's like forking things. Namecoin was a fork of Bitcoin. There's kind of like these extrapolations.
Yes.
You tried to fork Bitcoin yourself, but then it just didn't happen.
Yes, it was super, super, super early. Like as early as you could be, like 2011. And I think this was like pre Dogecoin. So
Yeah.
it was just like, you can download because it's an open source project. So you download and it's like, okay, but how do you roll out another one of these? But it was like before there were even like good places to find like how do you do the generative or the Genesis hash? Like where does that come from? And then I didn't speak. I think it was in like C++ plus plus or C. So it was like, out of my dialect of what I'm used to coding in. It was just kind of too far removed without the right, guides on how to do this yet. So then later, it becomes super easy and it's a one-click thing. But at the time, I remember downloading the source and having the intent to do it, but then just not being able to quite crack it.
Yeah, and also, Doge is a crazy story because obviously getting market traction and the founder or
Yeah.
I guess founder is probably the right word of Doge kind of like hates Doge now, don't they? So it's kind of funny where
I don't know. Yeah.
I think they've completely removed themselves from it from like last
I
I heard.
believe it.
But it's funny how it became this like living, breathing beast after that long because yeah,
Yeah. It's
it
like
was like
community owned.
it's a joke. Like as in like it was
Yeah.
designed as a joke. I don't mean it as
No,
a
I
joke.
remember it
Yeah.
feeling like a joke when it came out because it was like I had, however many, like let's say a million or I don't even know the numbers, but I had, wallets of it and then just like, yeah, just delete, because it's not worth anything. It's just like, a stupid number on a stupid game. And then had no idea, didn't save any of those private keys.
Yeah.
And then
Maybe.
years go by, then it turns out to be a real money.
Yeah, and they're gone. Can't go digging for them in any old hard
Hmm.
drives.
Nope, gone forever.
Everyone has those stories in crypto, if you want to call it, don't they? It's kind of almost a rite of passage. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, one or more of those stories.
yeah, well, look, let's just say it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's better to be able to laugh about it. I feel sorry for that guy that really wants to
Yes.
find that USB that's in like a rubbish tip, which I assume is just completely gone now. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a few of them, and then like just trying to get that password figured out. I'm sure.
and the pizza guy on Bitcoin, although
Yep.
he's spoken publicly. I think he's a great example of speaking publicly around the fact that he doesn't regret buying the pizzas. Like back when he did make that trade,
It was still, yeah, still a good trade.
he thought it was a great trade. Like, how do you know?
Yeah.
there's always someone on the other end of a trade,
Yeah.
which
Could have gone either way.
100%. And then riding the highs and lows. There's no guarantees. Although we've seen recently, I don't know if you caught it, that a very very old Bitcoin wallet, moved recently. So there are definitely
I
people
heard
who
about that.
sat on it for a long time. It, you know, Speaking of, I guess like future plans, what have you thought about another release on Bitcoin or this FX hash kind of experiment? Has it kind of like
Yeah.
stimulated any thoughts about what you might want to do on another chain? Hopefully, bring in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always still like playing with new ideas. So I'd want to play more with Bitcoin and figure out how to do something more generative on it. That's something where I haven't quite figured it out yet. I need to read the manual, but how to do yeah, just pure JavaScript on there. Maybe some shaders would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
well, shout out to Pavel Duko, who's a Gamma Artist ambassador, who's put out some really good docs that people can look up. It's public. It's on his X page. So yeah,
sick.
that would be awesome. Have you got some old experiments? Have you got some other artwork or code
I'm running out. I'm running
sitting in
out. It's
folders?
time. I got to start making new work now, but I'm getting caught up now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. It seems like you're back. This archivist story, the fuck yeah guy, Ryan Bell, you've been etched into history. So,
Yeah,
I encourage people check you out. Obviously, have a look at everything that you've put out. Have a look at your
Yeah,
upcoming FX hash drop. Certainly jump onto Gamma and look up Dark Forest. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to have a chat. It's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it, Brett. This has been fun.